Start recording, please, Larry. Okay, got that. All right, we'll call to order. I'll call the roll before I read that statement. Commissioners, my name is Rick Smith. I'm the chairman. Art Tanner, say here so we get a record of it. Say here. Okay. Beth Steele.
Here.
Dana Oviatt.
Here.
Blake Powell.
Here.
Okay, those are your 5 voting commissioners. We also have 2 elected alternates, Larry Dunn
Here.
and Lynn Marshall. And Lynn, you need to unmute. Okay, thank you. All right. Before we get into short-term rental information, this is a statement I have to read because of the governor's executive order. This meeting of the Noank Zoning Commission will take place through remote meeting technology. My name is Rick Smith. I'm chairman of the commission. The host of the meeting is Larry Dunn, who's an alternate zoning commission member. Anyone speaking should state their names prior to speaking each time. This, of course, refers to commissioners and alternates. It's a special meeting, not a public input session, so the public is invited to listen and observe, but not speak. Participants will be commission members and staff. Okay, participants who would like to comment on an item or share a screen item should indicate by using the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen or by raising your hand visually in front of the screen. After the raised hand has been detected, the participant will have the opportunity to speak after being called upon by the chairman. Mute your microphones until called upon. That refers to everybody else in a regular meeting. Commissioners and alternates, you should leave them on. Same thing with a second or offering a motion. Raise your hand, but also speak up so we get a verbal record of who's offering a motion and who's seconding. To vote on a motion, I will call on people by chair, essentially a roll call vote to make sure we have an audio record. All participants must identify themselves before each time they speak. I'll try and identify people as I call on them, so we minimize the aggravation of that. We'll always invite people to send emails or letters if they're so inclined on anything they've heard. And then finally, a recording of tonight's meeting will be posted on the Town of Groton's website within 7 days of the meeting. So that's that. The agenda is up there. The sole item is, well, 2 items actually. Consideration of council's comments on short-term rentals and action on proposed STR management measures and the process for obtaining public input on the short-term rental issue. I'd like to make a few remarks at this point. Unusually, relative to past meetings, you all know we've had an unusually large number of letters and submissions from the public. They are part of the record. They are not relevant to a proposal yet because we haven't approved a proposal yet. Sue and I will be sending these to you in batches at the end of each week. So anything that comes in since the last time will be batched up and sent to you. And also we'll get them into the record of correspondence so that if people want to see them, they can ask and we can give them access. Once we decide on a proposal, all the measures included therein, then we'll set an informal public meeting date and invite public comment, verbal or written. It's important that boundaries, the start and end of public comment periods are defined and all comments that come in within that period. So the letters we received are enlightening, but they are not yet part of the public comment record for public input meetings. With that said, the agenda tonight was to look at various measures that have cropped up and that we need to iron out before we get to the point of having a final proposal for public comment period, or for a public comment period. So one of the things I had distributed as a draft was the potential amendments to history and identification of issue. Lynn had mentioned this at the last meeting that might not be a bad idea to go back and look through those now that we've had 10 months or so of development, and make sure that our measures and our goals and purpose statements all track well. The other thing I will note that when we got the Freedom of Information request in February, I was struck by the fact that almost every question in the list of questions related to that first page, questioning the background, the basis for the things we said in that page. And it started me thinking that maybe, we did that back in May and early June and used it as our focal point for moving forward and developing measures. But now, as we get closer to the end of the drafting stage, I thought it would be worthwhile to look at if there's anything that would be worth revising to better identify our concerns, and if nothing else, smooth the rough edges of the document itself. So Larry, if you put that Technicolor thing up, this was my crack at things. I'll just use one as an example. When we wrote this, which was back many months ago, we said the last 4 years because it was 16, 17, 18, 19. Well, since then, we've had a full year go by. And so I changed that instead of, excuse me, instead of in the last 4 years, since 2016. Changed words that may abrade people a little bit, exacerbated, changed it to facilitate. I see you, Nip, but I'm speaking. Just hold on for a second.
I was going to ask Larry to expand it so it'd be a little easier to read.
Okay, if that can be done, we can do that.
All right, I might have to take it out of OneDrive and put it on my local to do that. So let
My
me.
apologies, but it's very hard to read as is.
Yeah, hit open and see if you can expand that way.
Well, let me open it. That's bigger. Is that okay?
Yeah. It also ruined your formatting though, down below.
Yeah, well, put it to the second page.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
It numbered things and put a whole bunch of extra stuff in there that spread the thing out.
All right, let me switch it to the Word document local. Give me one more second.
Okay.
Share. All right. How's that?
Except it's still the formatting is messed up.
Well, I don't think there's it didn't lose anything, so.
No, it changed the order of words. You look in A, the original document says, Noank will lose its residential quality of life and its civic character because of ever increasing numbers of visitors is struck out, short-term renters is put in. So you got words out of whack there. Can you go back to the source document outside the OneDrive? Or do you not even have that?
Let me try and find that.
Am I, as a host, can I put a document up?
Yep.
All right, let me see if that's the easier way of doing it. If I can just
All
minimize.
right, let me get out. Meanwhile, I'll go look for the other document. Stop
Yeah,
sharing.
coach me here on, okay. There we go. All right. All right. Okay, this is the one that doesn't have the struck out text in it. All right, let me try and get that back.
But when I download it, it changes the format.
Yeah. It don't look like I even saved that. There it is. All right. All right, can we use that one instead now? Everybody see that?
Not yet.
Not sharing yet.
How about now? No? No. All right. Let me do this.
All right, I got a PDF version of it that seems to be
Yeah.
okay. I mean,
All right, how's that?
that works.
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, so just two examples, and I don't need to belabor it anymore. I've tried to find words that either are less offensive or more accurately describe like the time change since 2016, things like that. So you saw it as a draft, staff draft copy. Now's the time to publicly comment on whether you like the changes or you don't. You want to go paragraph by paragraph or simply say, no, you like it the way it was originally. I'm open to all sorts of suggestions. It was just my attempt at trying to find a better way to say things. So how do you feel?
Rick,
Yep, Dana, over that.
yeah, Dana Oviatt. I don't see any problem with the changes that you've made.
Okay. Anybody else? Nip, Tanner?
Nick Tanner, I agree with Dana.
Okay. Any disagreement with going with this revised language? I don't see Blake or Beth saying no. So, all right, we'll just adopt these changes. And again, nothing is final till it's actually final. So we'll go ahead and make those changes. All right, the rest of the discussion tonight, as I see it, is the list of items that we still have to reconcile based on the last best draft we have of what a proposal might look like. So if we can get this one back off the screen, and Larry, you can bring up that document of dated March 29th.
to share.
There you go. Thank you. Same problem. Too small, right? Yeah, I wonder how.
Let me try. This one's a little easier to do. How's that?
Yeah, that's better. Give it one more burst, then we'll see if. Yeah. There you go. Good. Everybody okay with that? Commissioners okay with that? Yeah, the way this is organized, we're losing people right and left on the. Okay, so
Oh, this-
disagreement, we can see it. Nip, you can see it well. Okay, so let's do that. We'll skip that first page. We just did that. Okay, Larry, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Okay.
just got, put myself
Let's
on.
scroll up to page, well, we'll go quickly through the first couple of pages just so I can explain what they are for people who are viewing. So that's the page we just dealt with. Go up to page 2, please. Okay, this would be new language, and this first page and a third is nothing more than saying short-term rentals would be applicable in each of the districts of the Noank Fire District. Nothing more than that, but from a regulatory writing point of view, it has to be said 7 times to track to our existing regulation. So essentially, the first page and a third just says it applies everywhere, whatever we do. Okay, keep going, please. Okay, now here's off-street parking. We did have one issue that came up, and it was suggested that, to be clear, this sentence, third or fourth sentence in that 9.1.15, driveways may be included as required space for short-term rental uses. That was simply to clarify something that seemed a little unclear to some. So that was an addition into the text from a month ago. Any disagreement with the addition of that sentence? I don't even have all my commissioners. Beth or Dana, any disagreement? Shake your head. Okay, no. All right. All right, then we'll go back. All right, scroll up then. Signs, there were no changes in the last month. Fees, no changes. Keep going, please. Okay, here's definitions. I don't think after our meetings with John that we had any definitional changes, although as we get into further issues, we may want to come back at them. So for now, let's just skip past definitions. I should say this for the members of the public who maybe haven't sat in on our meetings to date. As a business meeting of the commission, we're not taking public comment, questions, anything. So when you have the hand raised icon, it's not going to be effective. I know it's frustrating, but when we're ready to receive public comment, we'll announce a date. We'll tell everybody we can think of that needs to know, and then we'll have the meeting to get the public comment. For now, it's our business meeting to discuss our views, thoughts, and ideas, and continue working on this draft to get it in a position where we're satisfied going to the public. So just so you're aware of how the process works, that's where it is. Okay, purpose statements. That document we were looking at, I wish I hadn't closed it because now I have to go back in and Larry, can you stop screen sharing? Well, let me just read what I had. We don't really need to see a document for it. One of the purposes struck me that we could make it a little clearer as to our intent. You recall many times we have mentioned how we're most interested as we approach making short-term rentals actually legal in the fire district instead of what they are now, which is a prohibited unauthorized use. The thought was that we principally wanted to try and provide opportunities for residents to remain in their home. Okay, that's kind of a catch-all, but that's my sense of what you've all expressed from time to time. And it struck me in that E, discourage replacement of permanently occupied residences or long-term rental properties by STRs, that it might be useful to add this at the end. In order to enhance the prospects for residential properties to remain residential in nature, rather than be converted to lodging accommodations. I'll read that again if you want to hear it in context. Who's speaking? Please, can we identify that person and mute them? Unless it's a commissioner. Right. All right. I'll read that again and you can see it in context. Discourage replacement of permanently occupied residences or long-term rental properties by STRs in order to enhance the prospects for residential properties to remain residential in nature rather than be converted to lodging accommodations. Is there any comment on that? Agreement or disagreement or just comment? Dana or Beth? Anything? No? No? Okay. Lynn, Blake, Nip? Okay with you? Okay with you? Lynn?
I think it's okay, but I'd have to see it in writing and think it's a long sentence. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay, Larry, you stop sharing. I'll put the document back up and I'll share it. Okay, it's at the bottom of this page. So read that for a minute and see what you think of it.
Okay.
You're okay?
Let's see.
Lynn, are you okay with it?
Yes, I'm okay with that. I was just a little confused. I'm not sure that it related to, you're saying allowing people to stay in their homes. But I'm fine with that sentence.
Okay, then let's declare a victory. I stopped sharing. Larry, can you start sharing again with that
Yeah.
document, please? Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm going to poll people to be sure there's no objection. Art Tanner, okay with you?
Yes,
Okay, Blake? Lynn is okay. Dana is okay, was before Beth was okay. All right, so that's, and Larry? Larry's okay?
Okay,
Okay, we'll make that change then in the next draft. Okay, moving on. The next item is the apartments issue. And I haven't asked you this yet. I don't want to put you on the spot. Nip, would you like to introduce this subject as your concern, or would you rather have me do it?
Since I don't know which side you're gonna come down on, this is Nip Tanner, since I don't know what side you're gonna come down on, Rick, why don't you go first?
Okay, I'm going to offer both views as befits the chairman. There are two concerns. One, that we not lose long-term rental stock in Noank, which the concern is that if apartments were to be converted from long-term rental stock into short-term rental stock, we might very well lose that. The other concern is that how we do this matters from a legal sense, how it's approached in meeting equal protection issues, and the kind of reasoning we use to support it has to be ironclad, because it'll be one of those issues that upsets some people. When we discussed it with counsel, he had an alternative way to approach it, but we did not want to make any kind of a decision in a privileged meeting, an executive session, because we wanted all of our debates to be out here in the public. So here we are in the public. So the two options are have a provision that defines apartments and then prohibits their use as short-term rentals. The other way of doing it is to simply say only one unit per lot, per property lot, can be used for short-term rentals. That was felt to be more of a, and there it is right there, C, at the bottom of the middle of that page. That was viewed by council as a way that better satisfies the equal protection, rational basis type of things that we have to go through in order to justify what we do. So the debatable point now for the commission tonight is to decide which one of those two alternatives we're more comfortable with. So that's my best effort to tee up both sides, Nip. So
Okay,
ahead. Art Tanner.
Nip Tanner. In listening to John Casey's thoughts and suggestions, it appeared to me that he did not understand the role of apartments in providing moderately priced housing in Noank. And it seemed to me he was relying on the section that was put into the regulations a few years ago to prohibit additional multifamily housing being created. However, there are lots of apartments in my neighborhood. In the 2 blocks between my house and Dana's, there are 10 property lots which contain apartments, and they account for somewhere between 15 and 20 apartments. Currently, I believe 2 of them are operating as short-term rentals, but the rest are occupied by year-round, in some cases, long-term residents. Some of those residents have been here longer than I have, and I've been here for 21 years. So as I said, it provides affordable housing in Noank that I don't believe can be replaced if we allow them to be converted into short-term rentals. Allowing apartments in each of those 10 properties that I mentioned to be converted to short-term rentals is going to run the risk of changing the character of my neighborhood. And I don't know the extent to which this might be true in other parts of Noank, but it's certainly true here. I'm very concerned about turnover, strangers, so forth, to the extent that allowing those conversions would create.
Okay, thanks. Others? And I'm going to try and scroll back and forth so I make sure I get Blake, Beth, and Dana also, because they're not on my screen. Beth, Dana want to comment, or Blake? Or Larry or Lynn?
Can you see me, Rick? Dana?
Well, hold on. Yeah, there you are. Okay, go ahead. Dana.
Dana Oviatt, so I'm going to take the opposing view. I'm having difficulty figuring out how it's fair to prohibit a whole category of Noank owners from running short-term rentals. Many of these owners live on their property, the very situation we were trying to celebrate and to give priority to with respect to operating short-term rentals. And I'm finding it difficult to justify making it okay for someone to rent their second home short-term, a person who is fortunate enough to have a second home, but prohibit a person from operating short-term rental who lives in Noank full-time and who lives full-time on their property, who may live full-time on their property. Again, I get the importance of long-term rental housing stock, but by prohibiting apartments, we may be doing it on the backs of some relatively smaller, less well-off operators who may not have the good fortune to own a second home. And I think by prohibiting apartments on the rationale of preserving long-term housing stock, I think we've strayed a long way from our original intent and purpose of regulating short-term rentals.
Okay, thank you. Others? Beth, Beth Steele?
I think Dana expressed it very eloquently, and I adopt his position 100%.
Okay. Lynn or Larry, who I don't see anymore. Let's make sure we have everyone. Okay, Lynn or Larry? Blake, I'm sorry, I didn't have, yeah, okay, Blake Powell. You're gonna have to unmute. There you go. Blake Powell.
First, I was going to say I can't unmute myself.
Okay.
I understand and agree with Nip's concern, but we have other provisions too that address that, and I think limiting the total number of days that you could do a short-term rental also limits how much of the rental properties or apartments, however you want to call it, that would be enticed to do a short-term rental versus a full-term, a long-term rental. So I think there are other provisions to address that in that as well.
Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's 4 commissioners. I'll hold my thunder. Lynn and then Larry, wherever he went to. There he is. Okay.
Yeah, I just say that what has happened in other communities is that because the short-term rentals are much more lucrative than a long-term rental, which anyone, the people who have those properties, they still can have long-term rentals. It's not like they can't have any income from their property. They still can have long-term rentals. The short-term rentals end up being lucrative, and what often happens then is that the long-term rentals are displaced by short-term rentals. That's what other communities have found. I'll give the example of Boulder, Colorado, and that's what they happened. And within a couple of years, they had lost so much of their rental housing stock that it was a huge problem. So then they said that they had to allow the short-term rentals in all those places where they were happening at that point, but they said no more new ones, no additional ones can transpire, because it was causing a housing crisis. So in Noank, we have the people who are in those apartments add a lot of vibrancy to our community, and they're people who wouldn't be buying houses here. So my concern is that, we would end up, kind of kicking them out of town, and that would be to the detriment of our community. But I perfectly well understand the other arguments. The other thing is we have not talked about enforcement yet, and how easy it is to enforce, and whether we really want to have that number of day a year limit or not. So I think before we go too far down this road, we should be looking at enforcement issues.
Okay. Okay, Larry Dunn, let me get him in there. Larry, okay,
Yep. Yeah, Larry Dunn. I'm let's say leaning more towards what Blake said, because there's other items in the requirements, you know, the one STR per use per lot. So the point would be, I guess, in that situation, or just looking at that one in particular, if I have two apartments in my house, you could use one of them for STR, given that, but you can't do both. So, you know, to me, that seems to be a more middle ground in terms of providing the, you know, the flexibility, but not, you know, wiping out, you know, all the apartments. And it's consistent with what we're, you know, holding other, you know, owners or property owners requirements to.
okay, thank you. All right, my view is, while I see both arguments and I see Nip's logic or concern about losing long-term rental stock for lots of good reasons, I think the solution offered by John makes more sense to me because it gives everybody one chance to have a short-term rental. I envision a Noank hosted rental as a house with somebody living in it who's the resident, the owner, and then they have an apartment or a room or a couple of rooms, and they want to rent that out, and that way it makes it more likely that they can stay as a resident in their home. Prohibiting apartments keeps them from doing that, which troubles me. Allowing one short-term rental use per lot allows them to do that, and they can't do any more because we already say in there only one short-term rental per lot. But for multi-apartment houses, which Nip has pointed out, it would radically change a neighborhood if a 10 apartment unit, there is such a thing in Noank, maybe a 6 apartment unit, if they all went to short-term rentals, that'd be a problem. Under the language that John had proposed, one of the 6 units could be a short-term rental and the other 5 would have to be long-term rentals, remain long-term rentals. So I lean that way towards his proposed solution. And frankly, everyone has spoken once on it and we got a lot way to go. So I'm going to entertain a motion if there is such a thing, or if not, I'll do it myself. Okay, I don't see anyone raising their hand, so I'll move on to adopt language that supports only one short-term rental per dwelling unit per lot, meaning per property lot. Is there a second to that motion? Blake Powell, when I hit this ask to unmute, Blake, then you have to hit something. There you go. Good. All right. Okay, the motion is only one short-term rental unit per property lot. And it's been seconded, proper motion. So is there debate on the motion? Nip, Art Tanner?
Yeah, some of the comments by other commissioners seem to belittle the idea that losing 10 of the 15 to 20 apartments in the 2 blocks between my house and Dana's was no big deal. I don't know whether they weren't paying attention or they're willfully blind to the consequences of going down this path.
As frustrating as this is, I'm going to ask everyone to try and maintain a certain decorum and not impugn the motives of people who spoke in a different way or for a different position, and argue with the message, if you will. Other people, anybody else, commissioners or alternates? Seeing Lynn?
Yeah, I would just like to say, that one thing that, so for, we're going to say just one unit and take out, not specify whether it's an apartment or not, that this wording is going to need to be changed. Already we have illegal use of apartments as short-term rentals because they're not legal to families, legal to family structure, and the lot size would prohibit their becoming one. So I think that the way this is worded would need to be changed because it says, look at the second sentence, it says, if an accessory structure that's not otherwise authorized is prohibited. Well, apartments also, unless it's otherwise authorized, is prohibited in all of our zones. So it has to already be, it has to be a huge lot that provides for more than one dwelling, or it has to be a prior use, it has to be have been grandfathered in before the zoning regulations have said that.
Okay, seems to me that's a worthy complaint to give to the zoning officer, but it doesn't have anything to do with the motion itself. The motion expresses our intent. Any other comment on the motion?
I think it's to the attorney to rewrite it.
Well, that's fine. It's going to
Yeah.
happen anyway. So
Fine.
we'll just make sure you write down clearly what your concern is, and then he'll be able to catch
Yeah, I'm
it.
just saying as worded, because that's what we were voting, they're voting for that, what is written. I'm saying what is written is problematic, would need to be cleaned up, just a point.
We will do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other comment by commissioners, or are you ready for the vote? Okay, I see no hands waving, so I'm going to roll call this. All those in favor say, I'll read the motion again so we're sure. It's basically, there will be only one short-term rental per dwelling unit per property lot. That's how I described it. One short-term rental unit per property lot. Okay, for the vote, Beth Steele,
Yes.
okay, Blake Powell,
Yes.
Art Tanner,
Tip Tanner, and it's no.
no. Dana Oviatt,
Yes.
okay, and I'm a yes. So the yeas have it, so we'll proceed accordingly and redraft to account for that motion. All right, the next item is the issue of the maximum occupancy, and you have to go into this document further in, and we left it highlighted in yellow so that it would be clear. John left two options in there so that we'd have a basis to look and decide. Here it is. Originally, we had 2 adults per bedroom with a maximum of 8 adults per dwelling unit, so that the odd 6-person house wouldn't have 12 people in the rental party. Suggestion was made that it should be 2 people per bedroom plus 3 people. And I think the way I recall how he described it, that tends to be a common way that zoning laws are set out. I couldn't, don't hold me to that. I'm not quite absolutely certain that's how he said it. Lynn's nodding that that's how
He
she
did.
Okay. So those are the 2 options for us. And I guess the question is, which one do you prefer? I have no real preference, after I wrestled with it a lot. They're very close. They're fairly similar. So whichever is your preference, we can do that. So does anybody have a preference? I see no one
Let's see.
leaping to the Lynn.
Yes, I think that John Casey's is an improvement. I think it's a little cleaner. You don't have to be going back and saying what's an adult and what's, it's just an absolute number. I think it's easier.
Okay. All right then. Is there any disagreement with that? I see Dana shaking his head no. I see Blake and Beth, view on that? Any disagreement? No, no. Nip,
Irrelevant.
irrelevant. Okay. All right. So let's adopt the second of the two. I see no disagreement to it, so let's do that. Two. Okay. Next item is application materials. This is up on page 10. There you go. This originally had said a short-term rental operator shall not less than 30 days provide the following information. When I asked John about that, he said he took it out because it's the obligation of the applicant to present their material in sufficient time for zoning officer to review it and make sure everything that's required is in there. So it behooves the applicant to start early and make sure that they're not waiting. Most applications probably are going to be done in the winter period as opposed to a few weeks before somebody wants to rent. So he just took that, he suggested that language didn't really need to be there. But since it was a communication about what's the right way to say something like this, I wanted to make sure the commission had the opportunity to look at it and decide whether they would rather have the 30 days back in or leave it as it is. Okay, any disagreement with that? No, Dana, Lynn? Lynn, no disagreement. Blake, Beth? The head shakes. Okay, Nip,
Yes.
pass. Okay. In that case, we'll leave it the way it is and move on. Non-hosted, well, I don't even know if I want to talk about this. You will recall that a couple of times I have brought this issue up, which has troubled me greatly. But I'm not prepared to offer a motion tonight. I'm prepared to offer a discussion of my discontent. And I like the idea that there's a whole bunch of members of the public out there because I think it's important that they hear it. Right now, the use of a private residential property as a non-hosted short-term rental can be viewed as pretty much lodging accommodations, like a hotel. People come and go every 3 or 4 days. A day later, another group comes in and it goes on for the summer. That can be viewed as a commercialization of a residential property, as opposed to somebody who rents for a month or 6 months, which is residential. They move in, they stay, they live there. So it's two different ways of looking at short-term renting. I'm troubled anytime we start to change something to which might promote the further commercialization of a residential zone, because quite frankly, that's a purpose for zoning. Hold on, let that guy in. Okay, purpose of zoning is to keep commercial uses in commercial zones and to preserve residential zones for residential purposes. I know there's a big debate. We've seen a lot of letters that say they think even short-term rental durations are not commercial. I happen to disagree. You know, we all have our opinions. I'm not prepared to offer something tonight to change, but after we go through public comment and we hear the nature of everybody's view that we can possibly get from Noank, and that means pro and con, I'm going to reserve judgment to make an informed choice of what I think is the best thing for Noank. If I do, then I'll offer it as a motion at some later time and we can debate it, and if it passes, good, and if it doesn't pass, that's also good. I'm always willing to go with the will of the majority. So that's my concern with it, but other than making sure it's still on the plate as a concern, I'm not going to say anything more about it. So does anybody else want to comment on that, or we'll just move to the next issue? Shake your head, Dana or Lynn. No. No. Okay. Blake, Beth, Nip. Okay. So we'll just move on. Last thing I had on, well, actually, my last thing is, does anybody else have things that they want to amend, suggest for further discussion, and maybe a change in what we had in the original or this document? So let's have that discussion. Is there anything else commissioners or alternates want to discuss? I don't see any. Okay, in that case, the other thing on the agenda for tonight was to have Larry give us a little update on, he and Lynn have periodically kept track of companies that monitor short-term rentals. I mean, it's an industry now because there's a lot of short-term renting out there. And just as internet-based companies met the need for short-term renting, there are also a group of companies that have met the need for monitoring the activities. So they're keeping track of it, and in the sense of making sure that the kinds of things we think we might propose are the kinds of things that they can handle. And beyond that, as an introduction, I'll leave it to Larry to give us a little bit of feedback on that. And you're unmuted. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So just from a quick status of the preliminary work we've done on compliance vendors. And I think the background, as you mentioned, is that, you know, with the surge of short-term rentals, there's a number of companies that specialize in only doing short-term rental ordinance compliance management. So it provides a kind of a baseline of information about what's going on across the country. So as part of that, let me call it preparatory staff work, Lynn and I have worked with two of the leading companies that currently support over 400 municipalities. We're at the low end, by the way, in terms of the size across the US and Canada. They do support, you know, a large variety of short-term rental ordinances. And once, you know, the commission has concluded its deliberations on the specifics for Noank, we can certainly provide a comparison about where we stack up against the norm, if you will, that's out there in the country. From a kind of an initial take, both companies have indicated that they're able to handle the kinds of measures that we've been discussing in terms of the latest items that we reviewed tonight. Just as an aside, they did a free review of Noank, and they research across 60 websites. I did not know there was that many that provide a way to, I guess, market short-term rentals. And based upon their data, I think their run was early, about mid-March. There's now 46 properties in Noank doing short-term rentals. And I think, as Rick had mentioned earlier, that's, you know, a significant growth from where we started. And right now it's clicking along about one new STR per month is being added to the roster, if you will. So that's the quick net of where it is. A lot more specifics can be provided at a later date when you know, we get to the discussion and the details of what actually is going to be proposed.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, alternates, questions based on what Larry said? Dana.
Dana Oviatt. Larry, I have it's a good summary of what you gave, and I appreciate it, but I still don't understand how exactly, I don't understand what quote unquote compliance management means in the specific instance of where we're going with this. So for example, can you take me for example of they monitor, they say we have 42 STRs going on. and they monitor these once a week, once a month. And then what happens to that data? And how much do they do it with it? How much do they pass it over to us? And I mean, I'm still in a complete mystery as to how this might work. And I think we need to really determine how it is going to work, because that in fact may change the way in which we design this regulation.
Right, I mean, that's fair. I'll try not to get too in the weeds. They do runs twice a week. The mechanisms that these organizations use is they really work on big data platforms, and they've crafted their, they call them artificial intelligence. It's kind of, let's call it sophisticated algorithms that go through a variety, and there's probably 80 to 90 different parameters that they search on. They also have access to public records that can quantify and verify other aspects of a specific property. So all this stuff is in the public domain, so they don't do any secret sniffing stuff. But they do have, and the reports are tailored to each municipality. Like I said, there's somewhere in the range of 80 to 90 parameters that get kind of, typically maybe 40 or so are crafted into a report based upon the ordinance that has been approved by the specific municipality. Let me pause there. So I can get more into the details, but I'm not sure. Is that sufficient, Dana, to
No, can I get another crack at you, Larry?
Yeah, let me have a little crack at this first before you guys go back and forth. When I set the agenda for the meeting, I said, this is premature. We don't know what we're going to propose yet. We need to get a little farther down the road to start talking about details of how things are being done. I thought that message was received. So I'm a little perplexed why we're pursuing it anyway. We need to decide what we're going to have for measures. Then we're going to have to go out and talk to the public and see what they think, because they have strong opinions. Then we decide what we're going to propose. Then we can be looking at how we enforce things and monitor things. This is premature. That's the advice we got. So let's take that advice.
I would like to push back a little bit on that. Just, you know, you can push back on me, but it seems as though we go down this whole path of this is what we would, you know, ideally want to do, and we look at and see what legally we can do. But then there is this aspect of what can we really enforce and enforce well? What is it going to take in terms of personnel? Are we, what would be timely to do? What would be simple to do? We've got all those issues. And so, you know, if we end up with something that's very, very difficult to enforce, and as a result, we don't enforce very well, then, or it just ties us up in knots, or we're just so slow with it that it's not very good, then is that gonna work for our community?
Larry, in your presentation, remind me, did you make the point that the two companies you've largely contacted have basically said the kinds of things that we're discussing they can handle in a monitoring sense? Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, the net is yes. As I said, that they support, you know, over 400 municipalities today, and a lot of them go well beyond, you know, any of the proposals that we've talked about.
Mhm.
And like I said, they do use some. They got some pretty sharp guys there that can figure out how to extract the data from the advertisements and from public data to kind of answer the question. So the first wave, and I agree with you, Rick, you can't do a final pass until we get to the end.
Mhm.
But, you know, in light with Lynn's question and Dana, is that we know enough now that says, I don't see any hurdles, you know, in terms of the stuff we talked about, without getting into specifics, right? And the specifics are required to answer Dana's question that says exactly how do they sort and search, what data do they do, where's the source of the data, all that can be defined, later when you agree upon what the specific ordinance would be.
Okay.
I guess I would just say that they are excellent at at seeing how many rentals are taking place. And in most cases, being able to say, where are those rentals, identify them. Even though some people are very good about trying to hide the location of them, they're pretty darn good about finding them. So they're good as a screening device. When it comes to more what I would like a diagnostic test, how many days are you doing this? They're more of a screener to say there may be a problem there. Where they're not going to say this was rented this many days a month. They're not going to give you back a report that says that.
Dana Oviatt, could I just clarify the nature of my question so that Larry understands it? And I'm not trying to continue the discussion. All I want to know is what information are they going to give us so that we can enforce? That's the basis. That's the basic what I'm worried about.
And I'll talk about typical stuff, Rick, not about Noank.
I didn't listen. I didn't ask the question for you to answer. I just wanted to clarify. All I want to do is clarify my concern.
All right, we can or will be able to answer that question, Dan.
Okay. Other questions of what Larry reported on? I see none. Okay, the other thing on the agenda to discuss, let's bring this full circle. We seem to have decided on everything we think ought to be in the document, the wording, the measures. There are some redrafting that I'll have to do and get it out as a preliminary draft to be consistent with the FOIA exemption, so you can see what's done. And then at the next meeting, which is April 20th, I would suggest we should have then a final draft that you see as a preview, again, a FOIA exempt draft. And then we vote on the 20th for that to be the basis of a informal public input meeting, because that would be the next step. And that process is what I want to talk about next, but I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with, we'll take what these decisions were tonight, revise the document to make it reflect the decisions, have that out to you, who knows, in half a week or so, so that you have a chance to read it before the meeting on the 20th. And then we would formally vote to say, this is the document we're going to go out for public comment on. Or, by the time that meeting comes, you may have different views, and that's okay. I mean, we should keep at this as long as it takes for us to get it to the way we're satisfied before we go taking it out to public for comment. But I would anticipate, if we don't have any other things that people want to revise or discuss further, that we would be prepared for a vote on the 20th to make it a document for receiving informal public comment, and then we would set a schedule and move forward. Any disagreement with that as a proposed approach? Okay. Then the last thing on the agenda was process for obtaining public input. To recap, we had agreed on earlier that rather than just develop a proposal and go out to formal public process, which has a notification involved in the papers and so forth, and then the public comments, but we have very limited opportunity to change things. We can approve, we can deny, or we can make minor adjustments, but can't make major ones unless we go back and start the process over and make big changes and then go back through the whole process again. That's why we adopted the approach to do the informal session, hear the public. I really want to hear from both sides of this issue. Anybody, the realm of comments we're liable to receive. And then we make our final decision, what goes in a formal proposal. And there are very specific needs we have to have with it. It's an application by the commission. We're the applicant. But it's got to have a justification for what it is we propose and a variety of things, which I'll be working on with John as time goes on. Just want to make sure everybody is still comfortable with having that informal public process whenever it is we assign a date. I see a nod. See another nod. And yeah, okay. So we'll still continue with that process, informal, but it gives the public a greater opportunity to influence the outcome, quite frankly, because we're not controlled by those sideboards I just mentioned. Okay, so that would be, so we'd have the meeting on the 20th, decide on the final proposal for informal comment. That time we would talk about a schedule, which I'll work on to try and set it out so we know what the date will be and also how much time we might need after the meeting to sift through comments, which I'm sure will be copious, and decide if there's anything we think we ought to change before we start the formal process. So that's how I would propose we deal with that agenda item, do it that way. Comment, Lynn, did I see your hand?
Yes, I was just going to say, on the history and identification of issues, would you like to update that with the number that there are, number of short-term rentals that have been identified most
I will.
recently? I think that might be useful.
Larry pointed that out. I thought, yeah, that's something that should be.
Because the last date is November 2019, and you can give.
Right. And 24 or so STRs, and now it's 46. So
Yeah.
Okay, I will do that. All right. Art Tanner.
Nick Tanner. Larry, I was a little surprised when you gave the number of 46. And I know when I have looked on the two major websites and wanted to find out what was going on in Noank, they came up with places that are not in Noank. They're in West Mystic, they're on Mason's Island, they're in, the real Mystic in Stonington. So to what extent do you have confidence that that 46 number is actually within the fire district?
All right, good question. I queried them on the mechanisms they use to identify a location. It's based upon GIS mapping, which zero in. Remember, I talked about public information, so the GIS mappings are available. The identification of Noank, and they actually can provide, the picture or the plot that says here's Noank, and identify very specifically location by location by location what's there. They claim, depending on which company you're talking to, 95 to 98% confidence level in the accuracy of their data.
Thank you. I'm surprised, but
I was too, tell you the truth.
Okay, Dana and Blake also, right? Okay, Dana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dana Oviatt, I'd like to chime in on Nip's comment as well, Larry. The original number of whatever was 26 that we had in our draft document was based, I think, upon the counting that I did a year and a half ago. And I did the exact same counting by the exact same method about 2 weeks ago, and I came up with 27. Now, I only used Airbnb and VRBO. And so the number of 40 plus is really astounding.
How many did you come up with in Noank Village? This is it, because I know there are at least 8 or 7 or 8 that I know of. So what did you come up with by looking at the listings?
Is that to me, Lynn? Or to Dana?
Well, I guess to both of you. I'm more familiar with that area.
Like this is worthwhile having.
I know. I'm expecting that comment. I know. But just as, but do we want to use that number? Is it a
No, not
valid
anymore.
number?
I would like to see it fact checked and make sure we
Yeah.
get the right number.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a detail that can be worked out.
Okay.
This point,
Outside of the meeting, I agree.
we're not talking about a final plan here. We're talking about,
Right.
you know, getting something that expresses accurately, you know, the nature.
But we need to have accurate numbers.
Blake, did I see your hand up as Dana spoke? No, you didn't. Okay. Beth or Nip, okay, nothing else. Okay. That was all I had in the annals of Noank zoning commissions. Well, that wasn't bad. That was an hour and 10 minutes. Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about on the things that are on the agenda, which is consideration of council's comments on short-term rentals and action on proposed STR management measures, which we did, and the process for obtaining public input on the short-term rental issue? Can't go too far afield from those two agenda items, but we can deal with those. If there are no comments, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Rick,
Yes, Dana?
Dana Oviatt, are we going to discuss in more detail at a future meeting, or will you be open to suggestions about how we run the meeting and what the format might be, and
That's
so
an
forth?
idea. Yeah. There have been a number of in our discussions, we've talked about a number of ways of doing that over the past, and I think we have more or less settled on a format that looks very much like a public hearing would, which would make a presentation, explain. So there are a lot of questions out there that people have not had answers, and I know they're seething, but the advice I've gotten in the zoning process, you don't go piecemeal answering questions to one person, a letter writer or a speaker, because everybody else who's interested in the subject doesn't get the benefit of seeing or hearing that. So the advice I got was wait until you have a public meeting and answer your principal questions so everybody can hear them at the same time, and it's part of the public record. So there, I'm sure the first meeting, we're going to want to answer, you know, maybe a half a dozen of those fundamental questions that people keep asking over and over. Then it's a question of the way to get the public comment. I favor you know, one in favor, one against, one in favor, one against. It's not normally how zoning is done. Bill Mulholland has pointed out that the way they do it in East Lyme is they take all four, everybody together, because then the record is clear and they're sequential, all in favor or all opposed, and then they take the other side. On something like that, I'm inclined to follow the advice of the people who do this sort of thing with zoning more. So we had talked about having people sign in ahead of time, so we get a preliminary sense of for and against, so we can kind of balance the thing out. I don't know if that's even possible to do, or whether it's so cumbersome that it wouldn't be necessary. I'm still open to suggestion because we haven't designed anything yet, but it seems like most times we're used to doing something like we had with the Ford's hearing, where there's a presentation made. In this case, we'd have to do the presentation because we're the applicant. Then we get everybody in favor or everybody opposed, and then we get the other side all on a block. Give them all 3 minutes, you know, however much time we think is necessary, depending on the number of people that have indicated that they would like to speak, and we would solicit that in the meeting call. So they would have to notify us that they want to speak. So we can kind of, we need to decide whether we're going to need to schedule 2 nights, which we probably will do, or just one, and make it a long night. That'll depend on how many people want to speak. So those are some of the thoughts that got us into where I thought we were, but I'm open to suggestions. So do you have a different?
Well, Dana Oviatt, I have several suggestions and concerns. My first concern is that the way that people are informed, the list. I know there's one list that we've been using in the past that has about 300 people on it, and I wonder if that's going to be enough. Because by my calculation, it's only about half of Noank. We don't have to get into the details, but the more people we get involved, the better. My other concern is that the proposed regulation should be available in a format which is really easily accessible. And it's been proposed that, you know, Word format is that can be easily downloaded and printed by everybody in Noank. And in terms of people participating, I would suggest that that each person submit an email with a proposed edit to a particular section. One edit per section per email. And the email subject line could be the subject number and the paragraph to get things organized and to get, rather than a bunch of generalities in terms of complaints, but specifics in terms of the complaints coming in. And I guess I would only consider those people who are eligible for discussion, those people who have submitted emails.
I think I remember John saying that if a resident of Noank or a property owner of Noank wants to speak, we need to provide the opportunity for them to do it. So constraining them by, you have to send in a proposed change to the measures you want to have changed is maybe setting a filter on something that we probably shouldn't do. I can ask them if you want, but
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to get at a way in which we can make highly specific the section to which they're referring to, and highly specific the changes they would make. I don't know if that would be helpful or not, but it's what we are ideally after.
yeah, I suspect, let me get that note down. Because I agree with the concept, you know, the motive that you have, which is get detailed comments on what you would change. I suspect 90+% of the comments are going to be don't do this. And that's okay. People are entitled to their opinion. They're entitled to tell us why. But if the letters we've received over the past week are any indication, people who are opposed to this are still in the mode of don't do this, there's no good reason. And we're in the mode of the commission has concluded it's worth proposing something, and then we'll listen to the comments. So we're at different levels of what we want to accomplish. I agree with you. It would be most helpful to me to have somebody say, you know, section 3 can't work and here's why, but it could work if you did it that way. That would be a very useful type of a comment, but I don't know how you make people give you that type of comment. Dana, follow up? I see your circle lit up.
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. All right. Anybody else on this? I think you've already given me a couple of worthwhile things that I need to pursue, and I'll try and be prepared on the 20th to follow through on, you know, the do's and don'ts, and then we can have more discussion because we won't even have scheduled a meeting at that point. So it's worthwhile to, as you've done, introduce it, and then we can think about it and discuss it again in public on the 20th. Other people on this subject or any other? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. I see that. Beth Steele, Dana Oviatt is a
Second.
Second. Okay, Beth Steele moved. Dana Oviatt seconded. It's a motion to adjourn. All those say aye.
All right.
I
Aye. Opposed? Nobody, so it's unanimous. So we'll see you on the 20th, and I'll be getting a document out to you for preview. Thank you all. Appreciate the effort.